Okay. So if it's in this kind of context where somebody's watching me, my peers, well, I mean, the reality is things like that can make a difference. And there's also a significance about teaching and training that it's part of something else, it's part of a bigger picture, and it's part of a learning experience for you that is not just about doing some movements on the floor and getting what you take and going home again. It's about doing that and learning about preparing to be a teacher and teach this to other people as well. So if I'm preparing a new lesson or one that I haven't kind of notated before, then I prefer it in writing because I can use a combination of imagining or micro moving and of having to actually get on the floor and do the lesson. I can sort of see the flow and I can go back and forth about what's coming next, or should I have actually done something here that prepares me to do what's happening there. So it gives me a better overview. And I can go at my own pace. I have a kind of a template that I use to note down. It's a bit like that. I can stick it up and show you some examples in a minute. That has the basic position and maybe even the basic movement. The position mainly, I think, then the movement, then things to pay attention to or to notice, or relationships, or prompts for kind of comments that I might make. If I think there's something profound or useful in the transcript that I'm working from, and I might want to remember to say something similar or use a similar explanation, then I'll try and capture a bit of that. But it tends to be fairly brief and shorthand, just enough that I can glance and get the gist of it without having to read too much while I'm trying to pay attention to the people in the room. With other contexts and other lessons, what actually helps me most is watching other people do the lesson. And so in my own practice, which is with a group of seniors, I tend to choose fairly simple, straightforward lessons. And sometimes I will teach them straight from the transcript, getting the feedback from what they're doing and adapt and adjust based on what I see in the room. And so I'm more interested in their experience rather than my experience of the lesson in terms of facilitating something for them. And so sometimes I teach from the template for them and prepare lessons in that form, and other times I'll just have simple sort of key instructions or stripped out transcript. Other times I'll pick up the transcript and kind of keep one eye on that and one eye on that.
Can you just say a little bit more about you're getting a response from the people that you are? Can you just say a little bit more about what it is that you're looking for?
One of the lessons that I teach quite frequently is a lesson which I think is called something like differentiating the hip and shoulder. Lie on your side and have your arms out in front. And you do the, back and forth stuff. And to my incredibly intelligent mind, it makes great sense to say, now take your knee, top knee forward. I tend to use words like top and bottom rather than left and right because we can all get confused with those. But there's one lady who's been coming to my class for many, many, many years who cannot make sense of that instruction. Sometimes she's not the only one, but if I say, take your top knee forward to this, and so I try saying, slide your top thigh along your bottom thigh, and she'll do that. She can come up with more combinations of movements than I can. I've tried put a dot on your knee and a dot on your hip joint, draw a line between the dots, put an arrow on the knee end, move your line along in the direction of the arrow. Still doesn't work. So sometimes, yeah, sometimes I go over and I put my hands on her thigh and indicate the direction. Sometimes I just give up and I wait till we turn to the other side and try again, and she'll get it. Does that answer the question? So also, yeah, I mean, there are a whole lot of different sorts of responses, some to do with speed, some to do with direction, some to do with how people can even get into the starting position. So, you know, lie on your back with your arms in an X. That kind of makes sense to most of us. But particularly with the older population, if they're lying with their arms out at that kind of orientation, then I have to figure out, is that because they've got dodgy shoulders and it won't go any further? Is it because they don't sense that their arm could be here, or they don't know how to find comfort with their arm here? So lessons have to evolve to kind of suit the group. I can't just press on with the instructions that has been written. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I have some colleagues who kind of believe that, oh, it doesn't matter if you can't do it or whatever, just imagine it, and they will teach all kinds of quite complex lessons. And I think that's a little unfair sometimes, because if you can't do the movement, it's sometimes quite difficult to even imagine it. And if you can't imagine doing the movement without pain, then that's not very helpful either. So again, that's sometimes a deviation from the script, as it were, that we might need to teach people some of these elements, like, can you imagine a comfortable movement? You know, can you imagine putting your hand to your face in a way that feels easy and comfortable? And to build from what they can do to something that actually gives them some value for the lesson. Sure. And so that will then involve me having a little bit of an understanding of the intention of the lesson. Is it about directing stuff through the trunk that I can focus on what the shoulder does, or is it important that the arm is there for some reason for the lesson? If it is important to have the hands up, do I need to find bags and jumpers and things so that they can bring the hand to there but have it supported off the ground? So there are a variety of ways of responding.
And they're exactly the kind of questions you should be asking yourself as you go. Like in those categories there, the one you mentioned is biomechanical. So biomechanically, does the arm really have to be up here to do this lesson? Or could you imagine an arm sticking up there and do these movements? So if you know that, then of course you know what to cut out and what to keep.
Which of course raises the issue of, do I single out this person who's doing something different and make them feel wrong or bad or different? Or do I try a number of different ways of saying it to see if I can reel them in? Or do I think actually enjoying themselves, let them go?
So there are things that you can definitely prepare for in terms of your notes and whatever, but can you see through these comments that a lot of the preparation to teach a lesson you already have in terms of your practice, knowing what you do when you can't do something. So in a funny kind of a way, you are now drawing out from your experience all those difficulties and all those moments of being able and go, oh, how did I cope with that? What did I do when that happened? And that's in the background for you in the future. Because if you're going to write out every strategy you could ever use in a lesson, you'd be there. That's why you have a training program. This foundation of experience.
You know, will we be taught some of those things? Because some of the instructors I've had that are really good, you know, people do manifest, I can't put my arm, or I can't put my weight on my wrist, or I can't do lots of different things. And you think, and they come up with, you know, grab a sock, or they have, you know, a whole bag of tricks which you can pick up by observing that. But it would be good to actually have some instruction on if you have people who can't do this, so I tend to use this strategy.
So definitely that is part of your curriculum. And also the curriculum is a kind of a living little beastie. And when you ask those kinds of questions, when you flag those kinds of questions, they'll be responded to. Yeah.
So if you have difficulty with something, it might be a learning opportunity for the whole group. So it plays out.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it is in the education of the participants that to find balance between do your own thing but follow the lesson, don't do your own thing, follow the lesson. Make yourself comfortable, but this is not about comfort, this is about learning, about trying something different rather than just what you normally do, but doing it in a way that keeps you in the state where you can be curious and your nervous system can get a pleasant experience rather than an unpleasant one. So it's a juggle, and a lot of my preparation is in the breathing between making an observation and giving the next instruction. That there's this little kind of internal checking out from my experience and my imagination and my micro movements. How else could I say it, or what would it be like to be that person? What do I need to do? Yes. Yeah, you need your kind of palette of
you do
references. But you know, my struggle is different from yours. So that's why for me, it's the moment in the room that is the richest in terms of figuring out how to teach it for the school.
I think I'm a lot, or resonate a lot what Jenny said with me. I mean, I also have an ATM class for older people. And I think it's that someone once said to me that your body is the text. And I think if you, in your preparation, if you really embody the lesson and know it, then when something comes up in the class, somehow you reference something, either by verbally or you might even add a, dare I say, direction that wasn't in the lesson, that you think might give that person more information so that they can continue on with the ATM. And when I'm preparing my ATMs for my classes, I most likely stick with a certain, my target group's also maybe 70 plus. So there's limitations, and a lot of them have been coming for a long time, so I know them quite well. And I think I've trained them in terms of move slowly, pay attention, and if you need to take a rest and I don't tell you to, it's your responsibility. So all those sorts of things. And so often then I might even pick one of my favourite lessons. And because I know it so well, I may just listen to it before I do the class as a refresher. But if I'm preparing something for a workshop that I haven't done before, or in here, then my process would be time-consuming but enjoyable. So what I would do often, like Jenny, is get the written word. And if I could go back to being in high school or uni, I kind of summarise it. But as I'm writing it out, in my mind, I'm picturing the movement. So I'm kind of already engaging with it and finding the logic of it and the feeling of it. And I tend to, when I write it, like Zoran and his notes, we decided we use different colours. Yes, so I'd say use blue or black for the movement instruction. And then I do it longhand. And I think that's partly because I embody it better than typing on the computer. And then because I'm at that stage, I need glasses. If I write big enough, I don't need to put them on. And then I'll do a contrasting colour for anything. If I think Moshe's got a certain theme running through it, I'd use a different colour. And if he's going, I'd pay attention to something about the body part that's obviously relevant to what he's trying to learn. I'd put that in a colour. And then, for the sake of what I've been preparing the lessons for this segment, then I record them. So then I get my little recorder out and actually record the lesson. And that's quite interesting in terms of pacing, because, you know, you have to, depending on the lesson, sometimes you've gone too quickly or whatever, but that gives you a bit of a sense of timing. But again, it just helps me sort of reading it through and imaging what the movements are. And then I'll listen to that. And then the third step that I've put in is very much like what Doran's put in here. With looking at, because often there's a position, and from that position there comes a variety of variations of movement. So I'll just have position, then I'll put all the steps down, and then over here I'd write down things to pay attention to. And I think this time I thought of that because Larry Goldfarb, another teacher, once did, was it Anatomy of a Workshop? But he was talking about, you know, how a lesson, you can also think of it like a play, that there's certain scenes, and that then within each scene there's certain things that happen. And so I was thinking, well, like, you know, in what I was reading, when you first look at it, there's like 13 steps, and each step's got 4 points in it. So that's a lot to remember. But if I can start seeing that, oh, there's really only 6 scenes to it, or 6 chapters, and then there's sort of different things that happen within that, I find it a lot easier to remember the lesson. So I basically try to understand the lesson and embody it. So when I'm teaching, I can engage with the people that I'm teaching. And like Jenny said, then you're more likely to notice if your instruction's unclear and people aren't following, or if someone's having difficulty, and then you can make adjustments.
Let me work in practice, making time. So these days, because I'm teaching lessons in a training program, my preparation time has skyrocketed out of the roof because I feel a responsibility to deliver the method, the basis of the method. So that pops into my mind, this notion of who are you presenting a lesson for and to what purpose. So if it's a new group of people that are not training in the method, then of course you have to prepare what you're going to introduce them for, like our conversation just before lunch, the kinds of things that are being expected, the process that you're going to do. So it's part of your lesson. If it's a group of people that you know really well, that really promote your flow of interaction, then the preparation changes yet again. So that's what I do now. So generally speaking, I will take, if there's a copy of a transcribed lesson, I'll use the computer through a Word document to make a text-to-speech recording. Because some computers have that capacity, or Apples have that capacity. You take a document, it'll speak it for you. It'll speak the whole document. Because what I've noticed, if I am left to my own devices to scan, I just jump. My reading goes jump all over the place. But with the thing reading in the background, my scanning is quite even and paced, and I can actually go to the kernel measure, which me through and yeah, it's text to speech in Apple. Yep, it's part of for visually impaired people that have that Apple has put that function in, and it just reads your document. It's great. Your systems account, bottom row, further along. Yes, yes. I haven't actually said that. So once that's there, these days I'll just listen to the sweep of the lesson several times, because it's not 45 minutes anymore, it's 15. It's just a flow of words. And because there's that experience there, I can hear the words, and it lands in me, and I'm kind of doing this inside and going, yeah, okay. And by the third sweep through, do I need to make any notes? No. But that's now. Yeah. If I'm just working from a script by itself, it is really time consuming. It'll take me probably 2.5 hours to actually condense what is written with all the various commentaries and whatever down to the position, the movement, what to pay attention to, and then a few comments on the side. And I'm skipping away. And mostly what I'm skipping away for is what is the movement that is after. Because the meta commentary is kind of in me already. Matter of fact, I think most of the meta commentary is already in you. Taking care of yourself, going slower, obey the techno law. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Most of you, that will come out. It's the movement instructions that are continuously varying. From lesson to lesson, it's a different set of movements, but that's the concept. So once you realize that you already have that in you, that you'll say those things, whether you want to deliberately say them or not, you don't need to write them down. You can do initially, just to remind yourself. Go easy, have a go. So most of my notes are about the movement instruction. That's what they're mostly about. And any story I'd like to. Now, if I work backwards in time, right back to where you are now, the context was quite different in terms of our preparing of notes, because there were no documents other than the awareness in San Francisco. What there was available was a blank sheet of paper, and in each break, recalling what that lesson was. And so, me being quite introverted to not get into conversations, I would go and write my notes. I'm being really honest with you. It was like, and so I have a book like this, handwritten notes of every lesson that I ever did in the training program. So in effect, I've already written out my notes. So when I graduated, I knew who I was going to teach. I was teaching dances, and I felt comfortable with dances. So with my colleagues present, I can tell you, I never wrote out a single lesson after that. I taught through interaction at the moment, and whatever I remembered or came back into mind, that's what came back into mind. But that's very particular circumstances, because in my history, as you know, we talked about movement and notation last night. In my history of movement notation and dance, it lives in there. You put on a piece of music, and if I remember that choreography, it really just goes, oh yeah, and then we do this, and so that's there. So I use this thing. So maybe you'll find your way of writing notes that you have your own strength. Mnemonic, in terms of memorizing, that you can use. Another thing that I've discovered, halfway, is now halfway between that timeline and here, is that after I've written my notes and I'm going through the lesson, like mentally rehearsing it, if I switch the rehearsal around, so instead of me imagining myself doing the movement, this is what I'm talking about. If I can visually project out there, like from a projector into the world, if I can project someone, seeing someone do the movement, that just sucks. And what that also allowed me to do was connect with the people out there, because if I'm in here trying to reference what I remember, that's an immediate disconnect. But if I've remembered by already projecting out there, then I'm already connected. So that's another discovery, but that comes after the whole mode.
Yeah, I could add to that. Partway through my teaching of classes, I guess it must have been about the time I got involved in the International Feldenkrais Federation and had to travel and be away from my class. And once you get a loyal following, people go, oh, what do we do if you're not here? And so I began to record lessons for them in my absence. But initially I would give them some recordings of other people, but you know, that was all right. They wanted me. And so to be able to sit down with a microphone and a computer in my bedroom or wherever, and imagine those people I know and talk to them, seeing them in my mind's eye, doing the movements, having the difficulties they normally have, making comments that address those difficulties. They loved it. I sat up and I was surprised you weren't there. It was just like having you in the room, and that capacity to imagine them.
That's really nice.
Useful.
That's really nice. So when you do have a class and you're preparing for a regular class of people you know, that seeing them, having them in mind, is really cool. I like that. That's really nice. So you see projected, I think you see projected up there, a grid. And it looks like the kind of grid that you would use to notate the things that we were talking about. But this grid in particular has a different kind of function. And it's the difference between looking at a lesson in order to analyze it and how it fits together, and looking at a lesson in order to extract some notes you can teach from. So this grid that you're seeing up here is not a grid that I would use to teach a lesson from. This is a grid that I would use to analyze a lesson. Because what I do here is, if you can think of time going this way down the grid, so as an instruction in peers, I note it in whatever column it notes in, and then what's the next instruction that appears, and then what's the next one, and the next one. So after a while, you start to see a relation in time between instructions. When he delivers what and when, because the instructions are sitting at different levels. So if I give you an example of that, now there's absolutely no doubt at all about my nerdiness. Right? I learned this actually from my wife, who is a movement anthropologist. So here you can see. So you get an analysis over time. So all these instructions are visually present. Just let you see, when does he say what and where and when about the various things he's talking about. Trying to teach them that, forget it. I tried. It's like, for some of you it might work. There's just too much to scan, like you said, Jenny. There you go. Yeah.
I might have misunderstood you. Given that you've got it, is that an alphabetical order? No, it's not.
No.
No. Oh, sorry. I thought maybe you were making. Is this a lesson?
This is a lesson.
Okay, so it's not any lesson. Things to do sitting. Any lesson things to do sitting. I thought you had aggregated.
No.
All of, and then you.
So this is, as soon as he delivers lie down on your back, he immediately delivers, and think of directing your, it's like there's hardly any time gap between the two. There you are on your back, deliver. So that's what it shows. But it's a lesson you go through like that. And if you like grids, do you have an example of a grid? So if you want an example of a grid kind of life, you could go on. Because Jenny popped those on. Yep. Yeah. So the more the space, the more vertical space there is between instructions, the longer the period is between gaps. When you read transcripts, there's no sense of timing. And that throws me off. So that's how I try to cope with it. So this is another grid version, but you'll notice all of those things have disappeared. Yeah. Yeah. Because you know how I said it takes 2.5 hours? By the time I've swept through that lesson in 2.5 hours and I've gone, oh, how does that work? Yeah, it's really kind of already in there before I've even gotten down to the top. And after a year of training, if you go and try to notate a lesson that you've done, you get something similar to that. The memory system, you do have an incorporated memory.
This is probably skipping ahead a little bit, but when you're talking transcripts, we're talking Moshe's transcripts, like, because if we're going to do a lesson, there's, you know, there's so many ATMs around that obviously aren't just from Moshe or that are based on Moshe's lessons. That seems like it might be a bit easier for some to not actually necessarily use those original transcripts, but to use other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we can, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any structure around that you guys recommend, or we just do whatever?
Same structure.
But like picking, you know, just ATMs, I guess, that we connect with the teachers or the style of teaching, or.
Personally speaking, yeah, you want to connect with the teaching style. I think in the May segment that I taught, I gave you a whole list of different things. Most of them were Moshe, primary resources. So it sounds like what the next list to make is another list of not primary resources. And you mentioned yesterday the transcripts of Mia Siegel and Gabby Aron. Yeah, they're great transcripts because they don't have so much verbiage. Gabby Aron and Mia Siegel, just a collection of 20 lessons, but they're excellent because they've got, I guess you could say they have pedigree. They were just probably the two women most closely, who most closely befriended Moshe in his early days in Israel, and were his confidants and exchanged lessons with him. So of course you would expect that their lesson would have a kind of gravitas to it.
So this is the Gabby and Mia lessons. They were taught in San Francisco, I think in the evenings around the time of the San Francisco training. They're lovely, clear, simple lessons that are ideal for general public. There's not a lot of faffing. The instructions are quite clear and simple. I've been teaching them recently. I think there's about 28 or something. So there's half a year.
So you've got more?
And then this other book by Harvey Sheltov, who was also one of the original 13. This book's even more helpful because it starts to set out the movement instruction and things to comment on, and it has photos as well. They're available on the photo at the back. And there's another 18 lessons there or something. So
as you, maybe this segment or the following segment, it seems like the next step is to give you lists of those kinds of resources that we would recommend. And then you don't have to deal with these really verbose things. But as a person that is training you, the reason you go to the source is because each time you go to the source and re-examine it, there's a new perspective in there, new perspective. So that's why going back to primary source. But do you have to do it?
yeah, so this is an example of something that I feel comfortable teaching from. There's lie on your left side, legs bent, arms out, right leg over on floor. Do you reckon you could figure out what that means? Yep. Okay, so there's enough information, hopefully, that you can sort of get the general gist. Slide hand in an arc towards the foot. With some comments. The left arm is to the front, the right palm is on the floor. Start with the movement small. somewhere down here, we're focusing on the knees and the elbows are coming together and moving apart. If I haven't taught it for a while, I may need to just kind of refresh it or watch people.
You've got shorthand going on in there. You've got symbols that mean something to you. Yeah.
So, yeah, you do need to remember what they mean, but yeah, it's prompt. It's just kind of enough there that I don't usually teach without notes. For me, I want to be assured that I've got a reference nearby if I need it, and as much of my attention as possible can be on what's happening in the room and how do I respond to that. So I've got to try and remember which step came next and which one before that, and does it matter? Or what was that really important thing I wanted to say? It takes me away from.
So if I can give you a true confession, another confession. So the very first time that I got hired as an assistant trainer in a training program to teach a lesson, I made sure I prepared. And I wrote everything down almost longhand. And I plonked myself down beside a table and I had my computer there. And I would like to believe that I was looking at people, but actually no, I wasn't. I would like to say that I was a good orator, middling, but basically I read everything. And that was because I was as nervous as I really was nervous as well, because in my mind, I had formed that I had to perform to a certain standard and impress people. So that's what I did. And one particular student came up to me who was a very, very sweet man. And he said, that was a really, really nice lesson. I said, thank you very much. I said, I read it all. I said, I know, but it's still not. So he picked it up. So there's a different tonality, there's a different delivery in the voice. And he picked it up. And gradually I've weaned myself, but you know, there's times that insecurity comes, and I want those notes there to help me. And I'm being really honest with you now. There's some days that I'll castigate myself that I missed an instruction. And there's other days that I go, who cares? It's a good lesson. And it varies. So there's no consistency. But if I do have my notes there and they're no longer long, I know that I can just go lean on them and then come back to them, which is very, very fun. So however you end up making the notes, and whatever squiggles that you make that you understand, that will be your process. And that's how you keep on going. Absolutely. You have to find your style. You have to find your stride, the thing that works for you. And that will change depending on who you teach for, and your expectations of yourself. Yeah. I like being perfect. Oh, God. It's a hell. God. Don't ever do that. I can tell you from a first-person point of view, it's not worth the trouble. I haven't.
I've just got a question about Moshe himself. Do you know whether he ever prepared with notes or was he always someone who spoke?
Yeah, I can tell you how he prepared. Look, sometimes I forget details that I've said to you and sometimes that I haven't said to you. If you've heard this before, please do. Up in Sydney in 1995, one of the graduates from the Amherst training, yeah. Anyway, Anyway, I'll remember his name in a moment. He's a trainer now, a very famous trainer in Europe. Whatever. He was getting a workshop. And at one moment he started to talk about, oh, you know, well, Feldenkrais was really incremental in developing, helping to develop that movement notation, which called Watchman, whatever. And then after the workshop was over, I went up to him and I said, look, did Feldenkrais use movement notation to write out his lessons and training sessions? He said, no, well, what did he use? He says, well, you know, he was an engineer, he was, he knew mechanics. So I said, yeah, so what did he use? He said he used to get a piece of paper, have an idea, and he would write, and this is biomechanics now, he would do a few vector diagrams that if you put a force through here, it should go this way, that way, that way, that way, that way. And because of his experience in judo and whatever, he'd get a sense of how that would flow, and that's it. That's the lesson. But that's not just writing a lesson, that's actually creating a lesson. So if you were to push on the foot and the legs were apart, where would that go? And then you would just figure out one instruction after another. And thank goodness, if we had a group of people like all somatic founders, think of one of Bandage Cohen, the group of people she had around to develop their work, extraordinary work, creative movers, whatever. So he had a group of people that kept on coming to him for 15 years. And so the first time around, he'd give his version of the lesson, record it. Next time around, next bunch comes in, after 45 minutes, the next round comes in, on goes the recorder. He'd just look, what didn't make sense in the room? What were people getting? Stop the recorder, record over that section, the new instruction, great. Next group would come in 7 times in one day. Same thing. Each time, he'd stop the recorder, look. Oh, they don't get that, let's make that instruction different. So really, you don't have any original recordings of the very first lessons we ever taught. But you could see each iteration was based on what he was seeing, what he thought people were understanding in terms of his instruction. And that's what will happen with your notes. You'll write it out, you'll think it's great, you say it, you go, oh, you don't get that. So next time, you go, oh. So that's the beauty of teaching the same lesson again, and believe I've taught the same lesson again and again, many times, because my repertoire is pretty small, but I could improvise from the repertoire. Yeah, I always write in pencil, and I always have a rubber. Yeah.
There's also an interesting distinction to make. If we think about Feldenkrais's intention, and what I guess his intention was that he had a bunch of human beings in which he wanted to evoke a particular response, which is very different from us taking a lesson that somebody else has taught and trying to reproduce it. And back some years ago in the educational community, there was some discussion about the difference between teaching and learning and whether in fact they were the same things or whether they were different. There were a number of people who believed that if I teach, then my class has learned, or should be deemed to have learned. Now these days, fortunately, most people understand that teaching is very different from the facilitation of learning. And when we prepare a lesson, as I was saying in the training context, we kind of feel some responsibility to stay true to the source material and teach what was taught there, but kind of balancing on the edge of how do we facilitate the learning of this particular group of individuals that come. When we teach our own classes, we're not so constrained by that. We can take an idea and begin to teach it as it was taught before, but shift in facilitating learning for these people, depending on what they need today.
That's a really good point.
And so bear in mind both those things as you compare. We sort of like to get it right and stay true to the script. but that may not be what this particular bunch of people need right now.
When we talk about a group of people, they'll all be a bit different. So, and that's what we're talking about is like, you know, one person finds it really, you find it difficult to connect with that person in a way that they make sense of it. And then if 90% of the class is, you know, okay with what you're saying, it must be very, because I've been in classes with more instructors, you know, saying it this way, then that way, another way, and you're left thinking, God, I'm doing it wrong. You know, there must be a stage where you start describing it and then the other 90% start doing it another way because they're thinking, God, I must be doing it wrong.
So the other day when you were watching each other, did you see the variety in the room?
Yeah. In a class of 10 people, you've got 12 different responses.
So look, that's a beginning, introduction to this whole business of preparing for lessons, and this kind of discussion will continue. That's the beginning. And as you, oh no, I've already said it. I said it this morning. That's why I selected the SLM lessons in the booklet, because there's just too much detail in the book. Ideally, it would have been nice to have an ESC book. Very easy to set up, but someone had borrowed one. Yes, please.
Lessons that originated. You've been talking about redoing lessons that are, or doing your own version of lessons that have originated somewhere else. Can you talk about when and why and whether and when not to do your own, conjure up your own? And if when you do, well, I know, but when you do, are they often based, however loosely, on? I mean, do you have one of these original lessons in mind, or is it that more likely that your own generated lesson will be sourced? You will source it perhaps from a combination or a theme, a number relating to a theme that have been done previously.
I'll try to answer those. Yes, the lesson will come out something out of my experience, or a memory of something. I'll remember a general pattern. So as you go on to analyze these lessons, you realize that a lot of lessons have to do with bending forward, a lot of lessons have to do with bending backwards, a lot of lessons have to do with bending sideways, and a lot of lessons have to do with turning. Human bodies, yeah, we could do a little bit of spiraling, but human bodies don't do very much else than that. So you could say, oh, wow, yeah, I remember this lesson that we did a while ago. I don't remember the details, but it's something about bending. And so you go, oh, yeah, let's look at that bending. So that's one way. Another way is, and I have to talk about in terms of the methodology. So implicitly, you're learning the methodology of the approach, how to cobble things together. Because you've heard so many ways of presenting the lessons, but things get put together. It's either step by step, now do this, now do that, now do that, now do that, or then do this, then do that, then come back to that, then do this, and then come. So you've got a methodology now. So, yeah. So that's the second way. So that's going around. So sometimes I'll think of an endpoint and I'll try to cobble it together using that methodology. Sometimes I'll, this is the difference between a planning program and usually I will ask people what is it that they want in a weekly time. Well, you arrive today, what is it that you want? And my classes aren't big, sometimes, 5 people. And I listen to each one, and what I really like doing, and this is just my own personal shtick, I like seeing, can I connect all those 5 things together? Yeah? Is there something that I can come up with that just stitches them together? And I like that improv. And so I'll start to cobble something together, and there are some lessons that I've made that I've thought, oh, sorry, you just fantastic. And then years later, talking to a colleague, have you seen this lesson in this book? Yeah. That's the lesson. Yeah. So that is a great reassurance that what I'm inventing is just not ad hoc, that it's actually grounded in the methodology that somehow embedded itself in me, and it comes out. Not only does it come out, but it comes out in a way that it came out before. And that's cool. And there are lessons that I've invented that I've done, but that's what will happen with all. We'll all do a lesson that it hasn't happened. Because the group of people, the group of people, it's cool. Yes, yeah. As one trainer said, I think I'm pretty good. I invented some really good lessons, but he invented 550. 550. Well, let's say 550s. Yeah, but he says, and his were like consistently good. Mine are every now and then. That's right. So in terms of delivery, well, let's finish up with this one, yeah? Okay.
From my position involved with the IFF materials committee and so forth, I can tell you quite clearly, you may not read verbatim and sell something that's in print. You can't reprint or reproduce in that exact wording. The materials, of which there are 550 Alexander Yanai lessons, there are probably equally as many in the training program, transcripts, and in the various workshops that Feldenkrais gave over the years. The understanding is that they have been given to the community as intellectual property for us to put into our own voice. So I can teach from the ATM book, I can teach from the Alexander Yanai transcripts, I can teach from these other things, because I'm taking the ideas and using my words to talk to the particular group of people who are there. If I want to make recordings of the lessons, then it has to be clear that it's my variation, my own languaging of those lessons, not just reading the transcript. When you read the Alexander Yanai transcripts, you will not be tempted to teach them verbatim. You may quote occasionally from them for the amusement of your class, but...
Oi, you, yeah, oi, you, over there.
Are you an idiot?